In this video, I'm going to explain how we calculate with percentages in two particular ways. But first, we're going to revise fraction of an amount. So in our first example, we want to find 1/4 of $40. So essentially, we can think about our $40 being a whole piece. And we want to break this $40 into 4 pieces. And that's 4 equal pieces. So 40 divided by 4 is 10. So each of those 4 pieces is worth $10. Now our fraction tells us as the numerator that we want 1/4, one of these 4 pieces. So one of those is worth $10. So 1/4 of $40 is $10. So that's one way that we can visually show how to work out a fraction of an amount. In part B, we want to find half of $40. So hopefully, intuitively, you would think that half of 40 will just be $20. In part C, 1/5 of $40 means we've got, again, $40, and we want to break it this time into 5 equal pieces. So 40 divided by 5 is 8, which means each piece is worth $8. And we want one of those. So one lot of 8 means we've got $8. So therefore, in part D, 2/5 of $40 means we've broken $40 into 5 equal pieces. So one part is worth 8, but we want 2 of them. So 2 eighths is $16. Another way we can look at this is if we use multiplying fractions. 2/5 of, which means multiply, $40 is a whole, so it's 40 over 1. We can multiply our numerators, 80, multiply our denominators, 5, and we could simplify that down until we get 16 over 1, or $16. Another way we could look at this is we know that 5 goes into 5 once and goes into 40 8 times. So 2 times 8 is $16 over 1 times 1. So let's see how this works when we're trying to find the percentage of an amount. It's pretty much the same idea because a fraction or a percentage are just two different ways of representing a value. So let's take a look. We want to determine 10% of $40. Now we know, because we've been converting between fractions and decimals and percentages, that 10% is 10 out of 100, or in fact, a tenth. So 10% is the same as finding a tenth of $40. Now, if we think back to what we've just done, a tenth of $40 means that we're going to get 40 and divide it by 10, which is just going to be $4. And essentially, by dividing by 10, if we think about it in terms of where the decimal point is for a whole $40 is at the end, when we divide a number by 10, our decimal point moves 1 unit to the left, which gives us 4.00 in terms of money, or $4. So finding 10% of an amount is really, really simple because we're dividing it into 10 equal pieces and we're just taking one of those. And it's simply by taking away one lot of place value. So we've just worked out that 10% is worth $4. And that's a really great place to start when we're trying to work out other percentages of $40. In part B, we want to find 5% of $40. We know already that 10% is worth $4. So 5% is exactly half of 10%. So if we divide by 2, 5% is worth $2. Now 1% of $40. Now we know when we're dealing with fractions, that's 1 out of 100 because percentages are out of 100. Which means we're going to get the $40 and divide it into 100 equal pieces. Now, if we think about 40 as a decimal point at the end, a whole number, and we divide by 100, which means we're going to remove 2 decimal places, and we're going to get 0.4, which means in terms of dollars, 40 cents. So 1% is dividing by 100. This is really helpful, again, when we're trying to work out more percentages. For example, 12% of $40. Well, so far we know 10% is worth $4 and 1% is worth 40 cents. So 2% is worth 80 cents because that's double 1%. So therefore 12% is going to be 10% plus 2%, which is going to be $4.80. Let's try that in part E. We want 110% of $40. We can break down 110 into 100% plus 10% more. So we know that 100% is $40 and we know 10% is $4. So therefore 110% will be 40 plus 4, which is $44. And we can use that same idea for part F. 200% of $40. If we know 100%, we can easily find 200% because that's going to be double. So that will be $80. So let's take a look at this when we don't have a value that ends in 0. Let's take $65. So 10% of $65. Well, we know, again, 10% is just finding 1/10. So it's taking 65 and dividing it into 10 equal pieces and taking one of them. And we know 65 is a whole number. When we divide by 10, we're removing a place value. That decimal goes 1 unit to the left. So we end up with 6.5. So 10%, because we're dealing with money, is $6.50. Now, if we know 10% is $6.50, it's very easy to find 5% because it's exactly half. So that will be $3.25. Now, 1% of 65 means we want 1/100th of 65, which means we're going to divide 65 by 100. So remembering, dividing by 100 is removing 2 place values. So we're going to move 2 place values to the left, drop our decimal point, and we get 0.65. So that means in money terms, 1% is 65 cents. That's going to be really helpful when we want to calculate things like 12%, 11%, 31%. Let's try 25%. Well, 25% is made up of 2 lots of 10% plus a 5%. Whoops. So 10%, we know is $6.50. So 20% is going to be double that. So we're going to times this by 2. So that will be $13. And we know 5% is $3.25. So 25% is going to be adding these two together to get $16.25. Another thing you might recall is 25% is actually a quarter. So in fact, we could just say it's 65 divided by 4. It's a little bit harder to do, but we could set up a division and we're going to get $16.25. Now I'm going to explain how we actually write a percentage when we have 2 amounts. And the most common situation that we find ourselves in is when we're trying to work out what percentage we achieved on an assessment. So let's pretend that we scored 40 out of 50 on a test. So we can write that as a fraction. And the great thing about writing something as a fraction, we can try and write it over 100 because percentages are written out of 100. Now this one's really simple because we can double the denominator to get it to 100, so we double the numerator and we get 80%. But essentially what we're doing here is saying 40 out of 50, which we know is less than 1, so it's less than 100%. We want that part or that fraction of 100%, which means times 100, and that will give us 80%. Let's work out if we scored 3 out of 10. Well, we know 3 out of 10 can be written as 30 over 100, so it's 30%. Or we could say, what fraction of 100% or 100 over 1 is going to give us that value? When we multiply fractions, is 300 over 10, so dividing by 10 will give us 30%. So these are quite straightforward ones because we can link the fraction of out of 10 and out of 50 to 100. Let's have a look if we scored 10 out of 15. 10 out of 15. 15 is not so easy to get to 100, but I can see that 10 and 15 have a common denominator, and that's 5. So if I divide the top and bottom by 5, it might enlighten me to something. So 10 divided by 5 is 2, and 15 divided by 5 is 3. So this is the same as scoring 2 out of 3, or 2/3. Now, one of our special fractions that we have looked at was a third, which was 33.3 recurring percent. I've got 2 of these, so this is going to equal 66.6 recurring percent. That's a really nice one to recognise. Imagine we scored 17 out of 22 on a test. Well, 17 out of 22, it's time to grab our calculators. And when we put this into our calculator, we're going to type it exactly as we say it. 17 divided by 22, lots of 100%. And that's going to give us 77.272727, and it continues. So that's 77.27, and the 2 and the 7 recur percent. In our last example, we've got a fraction 60 over 50. Clearly I can see it's an improper fraction. So this is the same as 1 whole and 10 out of 50. This is 1 whole and 20 out of 100. So this is 1 whole lot of 100 plus 20%. So 100% plus 20% is 120.